What should I do if I'm just not good at visualizing? What if I've tried it before, but I don't feel like I'm good at it? I don't feel like it works for me. I don't feel like I'm doing it right. Do I have to visualize? Or are there other tools that will be just as powerful for whatever I want to create? Well, if you have ever asked any of those questions, if you have been wondering any of those things, you have come to the right place. This is a bonus episode, bonus content from the Stefan Lovegrove show. All things are possible for the one who believes, and you are the one. And I'm so glad that you are here for this bonus content, especially if you have ever found yourself asking any of those questions regarding visualization. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to share with you 10 practical things that you can try, particularly if you feel bad at visualization. And every single one of them is something that you can implement even right now, starting today. So I'm very excited. I'm not going to take long on each one, but I have a list of 10 practical tools all coming your way in just a moment. Would you take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed? As always, this episode is brought to you by my incredible and generous partners all over the world. Partners, thank you for your incredible and generous support. And thank you for your help as we continue to grow this community to 1,000 partners all around the world. And I particularly wanted to mention that at the beginning today because even more so than usual, I would say, this episode is existing because of partners. Because earlier today, I sent out an email and I asked people to share with me what area they needed support in right now, what they were struggling with, what questions they had for me. Now, a lot of people took me up on this and sent in questions, and I'm going to be getting back to every single person individually as soon as I'm able to. But this one question came in early from a partner, and I was sitting with it thinking, I've got a lot that I could really share about this. Do I want to type it out? Do I want to send them an email? Do I want to put it in a voice message? I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do because there was so much I wanted to share. And I suddenly had the inspiration. Why not just hop on the mic, record in real time, and make it an episode? So this is not going to be a normal episode. This is not going to be a full-on teaching. But essentially, you're getting a behind-the-scenes, one-on-one style moment here because I'm essentially just going to share with you exactly what I would want to share to this partner and to anybody who would ask me this question. Because the bottom line is, I know they're not the only one who has this question. And I'm excited for all of the people that it is going to help. So that is how we have ended up here. Thank you to the person who asked this question. You know who you are. And let me just begin here. Because when they sent me the email, they quoted a particular line from one of my notes over the weekend. This is the idea that they wanted to ask me about that led us here. I wrote in an email over the weekend, the mental picture of your future needs to start becoming more prevalent in your consciousness than the mental picture of your past in order to create change. The mental picture of your future needs to start becoming more prevalent in your consciousness than the mental picture of your past in order to create change. And I would just invite every single person listening right now to take a second and ask yourself, which one of those dominates my mind, dominates my awareness, particularly maybe even you want to ask, dominates my imagination? At the core, am I living from the mental picture of my past or a mental picture of my future? So this particular partner quoted that line, and then they said, here's my question. I've always struggled with visualization. The closest I get is using mental pictures from my past and then revising those images with what I would have preferred to happen. But they wanted to ask me, what are your favorite tools, practices, and methods to yield mental pictures of the future? So that is the question that led us here with the full context. And let me just say right off the top here, visualization as a concept is indeed very, very important. You know, there is a spiritual text where God says to a character in the story, all that you can see, I am giving you. That line has always made an impression on me. All that you can see, I am giving you. And it always makes me wonder, if I was to receive right now, immediately in this moment, all that I could see, let me pause for a moment and take inventory and ask, how would I feel about that? What would I be receiving? What would I not be receiving because I didn't have any vision for it? I've always thought about that. As I thought about that text, all that you can see, I am giving you. So, on one hand, let me be very clear. I believe in visualization, and I do believe it is incredibly important. But I'm also aware that this entire topic can feel super complicated to people, and that sometimes it just ends up feeling daunting and complex and overwhelming. One thing I'm always trying to be mindful of is how complicated, and I would argue unnecessarily complicated, the personal development landscape can often feel. I think this is especially important when we realize that perhaps the number one pattern of self-sabotage is seek and do not find, or it could also be said, always be seeking, never be finding. And I am aware there is a lot of content even on this platform, and it leaves people feeling confused. It leads people feeling overwhelmed. It leads people feeling more lost than when they started, feeling like they could never get it right, feeling like maybe they'll never be good enough. And I don't ever want someone to walk away from my channel, from my platform, from an episode like this one, feeling that way. So I always try to think about, how can I make things as simple and practical and relevant, accessible, implementable as possible? I don't want you to ever be stuck in an unnecessary cycle of seek and do not find. And I want everything that I share to genuinely be able to support you in the most real and tangible way. So I really understood where this partner was coming from asking this question, because they have been taught that this concept is important, that it is a part of the creation process, that it is something that for the sake of their future they want to do. And yet, I get it. It can feel tricky. It can feel confusing. It can feel so many times when somebody is sharing something with us like, well, I don't even know if this is going to work for me. And maybe my brain is wired a little bit differently. And so I'm aware of all of that. And as soon as I read this message and this question, all of these ideas started coming up within me that I knew I wanted to share. So with all of that as background, here are the 10 things that I want to offer to this partner in particular, to every partner, and to everybody who has found themselves on this video. These are my 10 practical ideas from me to you. Number one, first idea I want to share is I love having a digital vision board somewhere in my life that always stays in front of me. That's my first and maybe most direct, most literal idea to share when it comes to visualization is I love having a digital vision board that stays in front of me on a consistent basis. And the reason I wanted to begin here is I think the way this question is being asked, and I think the way a lot of people think about visualization, is that it's like an exercise I need to do. Like maybe I'm going to go into a meditation and do a visualization, or maybe this coach, this teacher, this practitioner is now going to lead us through some sort of visualization. I think often people think about visualization as something we're going to do. And I'm not against that. I'm not shutting that down. I'm not mad about that. But one thing that I have found, at least for me personally, is it works better when I can build something into my life in such a way that it doesn't even require effort. It doesn't even require me to make a new choice every single time over and over again. It doesn't even feel like it requires me to do anything. I've already made the choice. I've just built it into my life. Right? An example I would use of that principle in general is when I book a workout class, in this case, referring to a group fitness class at a studio. When I do that, I have made a commitment, usually a day or more in advance, and it is now done. It is now decided. It is now on my schedule. Now, in this example, I guess it's an imperfect example, but technically, of course, yes, I do have to still attend. I have to go to the studio. I have to show up and actually do the work and do the workout. But there's something powerful for me about once I've booked the class, I can't cancel without a penalty. So there's a power for me in understanding I've already made the decision. It is booked. It is confirmed, it is locked in and on my calendar and non-negotiable now. There's something powerful for me there about I've already made the decision. So when the class actually gets there, it's not like I have a brand new choice to make. The choice has already been made. In other words, I have made it as easy as possible for myself to follow through on the thing that I want to do. And so for me, when it comes to visualization, I don't just want to leave it up to, will I feel like doing this practice? Will I remember to do this practice? Will I actually consistently make myself do this practice over and over and over again? I don't want it to be in that territory. And so the number one place that I would begin this conversation is I find images that speak to my future, that speak to some desire or dream, that speak to my vision in some way. And I find a place, physically and or digitally, to put them up in front of me in a way that I will inevitably see, that I can't help but see over and over and over again in my life. One way that I would explain this is doing this works wonders for my ADHD brain because it keeps the vision top of mind. You might have heard the saying, out of sight, out of mind. And particularly, I know my ADHD people out there relate. That phenomenon is real, that something can be out of sight, out of mind, and it's not that you really completely forgot about it. It's not that it doesn't matter to you anymore or that you don't care about that person or thing anymore, but some of us, our brains are just wired a certain way where out of sight, out of mind is a very real thing. And so for me, this is a hack because when I choose to put the vision somewhere in front of me visually, whether physically around my home or digitally on a device that I'm not going to be able to miss, it keeps the vision in front of me. It keeps it top of mind. You could say this is literally the opposite of out of sight, out of mind. This is intentionally in sight and in mind. So, this is my first practical tip. Don't just think of visualization as something that you need to make yourself do as an ongoing practice. I would offer, build it into your life. Put new visuals in front of you in a way that is one and done, or that, it can build over time. You can gradually add to it, and I'll speak more about that later on, but however you do it, once the visuals are there, they are there. And it's not so much a practice you have to make yourself do. It is something that you have put in place to keep the vision in front of you. That is my number one tip. Keep the vision in front of you. Use a digital vision board or whatever other equivalent works in your life. Okay, practical idea number 2 here. Get into a frequency of play. This is my number 2 tip for people who struggle with visualization. Get into a frequency of play. Now, you may recall from earlier when I read the partner message, the person who asked me this question was sharing they have tried to do some sort of visualization in the past. And the way that they were taught to do it was to revisit scenes from the past and to take themselves there in their mind, implanting a new image, watching it play out differently than it actually occurred in the past, rewriting the scene, right? Let me know in the comments here if you have ever tried something like that. Maybe if you've been, told to try something like that by somebody's content, etc. But I want to speak to this because while I understand that type of exercise might be needed or helpful or important for somebody in a specific one-time healing experience, and I really do know that, and I've done it myself, and I certainly acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge, though, that could feel quite heavy and intense to try to do often. Not to mention, it literally requires you to rehash the past mentally in order to get to the future, which is what you're trying to do with the exercise. And so I can actually envision there's a world in which this exercise ends up working against you because you're trying to create the future, but every time you try to go visualize, you reference the past, back to the past, back to the past, back to the past. And I imagine that might feel heavy. That might feel intense. That might not be the most helpful way to start consistently living and creating from a new vantage point. And so, might I suggest, as an alternate possibility here, tip number 2, get into a frequency of play. See, I feel like the context being shared here is visualization from a frequency of heaviness, from a frequency of former pain. Maybe we could say, best case scenario, from a frequency of healing. And again, there might be a time and a place for that. Within a coaching session, within therapy, within a retreat, there may be a time and a place, but not consistently. Do I think we want to rehash the past in our mind? And so I want to offer that there's a way to visualize that doesn't require you to reference the past every single time. Here's what I just want to suggest in terms of this tip number 2, getting into a frequency of play. You can turn on some music and get relaxed, get light, get playful. And you can lean into the moment and do whatever you have to do to get present, to get settled, to get comfortable, and to start feeling like yourself. Tapping into the energy of joy, tapping into the energy of fun, tapping into the energy of play. And what I want to suggest here is, for me, some of my most powerful visualization moments have come when I just got into a frequency of play. And maybe I was out on the balcony, maybe I was in my living room having a dance party, maybe I was on vacation, maybe I was on a boat, maybe I was with people I loved, whatever the case may be. Some of my most powerful visualization moments have simply naturally occurred while I was in a frequency of play. And so that is my number 2 tip that, particularly in the context of this question, felt really important to talk about and to mention here pretty early on in the list. I want you to find out for yourself what images, what glimpses, what imagination naturally occurs when you are in a frequency of play. Because one thing I have certainly found is that visualization does not work well when it is forced. And by the way, I think that's the difficulty with so many of these things in personal development. People want to do them. People are told they need to do them. People get all excited about doing them. But then there's so much pressure around it that it feels forced. And it's hard to be at peace when things feel forced. It's hard to be creative when things feel forced. It's hard to receive divine guidance when things feel forced. From my experience, visualization only works well in really 2 settings. Either a state of play or a state of rest. A state of play or a state of rest. Now, I'm going to say more about both of those as we continue down the list. But the bottom line to know here as we wrap up tip number 2 is it needs to happen organically. Either way, whether it's a high energy, playful state or a very, very, very calm relaxation state, either way, it's got to happen naturally. It's got to happen organically. It cannot be forced. So my tip number 2 for visualization and people who struggle with visualization is get into a frequency of play. Lower the stakes, lower the intensity, start to have fun and relax and feel like yourself and see what images naturally come forward there. That brings me to number 3, my number 3 tip, which I think is very related, and that is try letting it happen in motion rather than at rest. Number 3 tip, try letting it happen in motion rather than at rest. Now, I'm not hating on the visualization that can be done from a deeply relaxed state of rest. In fact, stay with me, stay tuned, because there's at least one more item on the list that is going to very specifically speak to that. But even just to honor who I am and my authentic self and how I tend to create, it felt important to me to share this number 3 tip and just to share this from my own journey for anybody else who might be wired this way, for anybody else who might relate. Tip number 3, one more time, is try letting it happen in motion rather than at rest. And what I mean by that is walking, driving, biking, doing cardio of some kind, dancing, right? There's infinite possibilities of what it can look like for you and I to be in motion. And of course, let me give the disclaimer here. Obviously, keep your eyes open and be safe, whatever you're doing. I don't recommend that you close your eyes while driving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But even with your eyes open, it's interesting to me. As I was thinking about this question and really reflecting on my own experience, reflecting on what has worked well for me over the years, some of my favorite visualization moments really have come through in a setting where I had my eyes open. Now, full transparency here, as I reflect on it, some of those were settings that were very dark. So it might have been a dark cycling room where I was on a bike and surrounded by strangers, but also in the dark, with a little bit of a clear head and an atmosphere that felt like I had the moment to myself. Could be a dark dance floor or, in a dark Uber or Lyft driving somewhere, right? So I am aware some of these settings, as I reflect back on it, my eyes were open, but there wasn't much to look at. It was a darker kind of space. But it really is impossible for me to miss this when I look back on my different visualization moments over the years. So many of my favorite moments happened while I was in motion. And I was driving or riding in a car. I was walking across a bridge. I was hiking a trail. I was in the middle of a fitness class. I was on a dance floor. So many of my favorite moments, I didn't need to be in a deep meditation trance for something to come through. They actually happened for me while I was in motion. So I wanted to share that, like I said, for anybody else who might be wired the same way. And maybe you've been beating yourself up about this, thinking you need to be eyes closed, lost in a trance, on a meditation mat in order for it to truly work, in order for it to be true visualization. And again, I'm not against that. I'm not hating on anything here. I just want to give maximum possible options so everybody can find something that resonates for them, a tool that works for them. And so that is my tip number 3. And I have found that oddly does work for me. And so many moments where a picture came to me, a glimpse came to me, something about my future came to me, I was, in fact, in motion more than I was at rest. Tip number 4 that I want to share that I think is a helpful distinction about visualization. Tip number 4 would be to consider focusing on experiences, not things. Tip number 4, focus on experiences, not things. I feel like part of what I'm speaking to here is like vintage personal development. And you all can let me know in the comments how this lands with you and what your experience has been. But when I was first dipping my toes into personal development and learning about manifestation and, vision boards was this new, trendy, sexy concept in the mainstream awareness. So much of that conversation I can look back and see was very, very, very focused on things. And so your vision board would have a house on it that was your dream house. And your vision board might have a car or a plane or a first class seat on it. Your vision board might have designer items. And I'm not saying this was all of it, but I certainly think it's fair to say, reflecting back, when I entered the world of personal development online, so much of the visualization and particularly the vision board conversation was things, things, things. Now, I don't even believe that was really the most energetically powerful thing anyway, because the truth is, things don't inherently have an energy to them. We can give them a meaning. We can infuse them with something. We can choose to feel or associate an energy about them and around them. But things don't necessarily have an intrinsic energy. Not to mention, desire for things is an easy trap where accidentally, without even realizing it, you start to operate from ego, not your soul. And so many of the things that we convince ourselves, I need this so badly, I want this so badly, this one thing is so important to me, it is everything to me, it is my number one desire. So many times when we do that with things, it really is coming from ego. It really is coming from potentially a need to prove something or a place of hurt, something from our past. It might be something that people told us to want. And it's often not the real deep desire of our heart. It's often not what our soul is actually guiding us to. So there's a lot I could say about things. But ironically, I feel like it is pretty accepted at this point that all of the younger generations tend to value experiences over things. Like, I think all the sociologists and anthropologists are pretty much in agreement with this, right? That millennials value experiences over things. Gen Z values experiences over things. That even in general, in this day and age, people of all ages are moving in a direction of valuing experiences more than things. I think that's in the collective as a whole right now. And so I just want to challenge you, for anyone out there who feels like you struggle with visualization, one idea I wanted to share is, could it be part of your struggle is that you have been taught this principle primarily about things? And it's hard for you to feel that excited about a specific number or dollar amount. It doesn't light you up to focus so much on one particular house or one particular car. And if there's a disconnect for you here, I just want to invite you to consider you can visualize in a way that is more about experiences than things. And I would just invite you to ask in this moment, what experiences might I want to have in my life, in the near future, in the distant future? What experiences would I like to have? And the more vivid you can envision it, the better. Real quick before we move to tip number 5 here, let me just say, there have been a lot of experiences that I have created and brought into reality in my life. And in many, many, many instances, and I'll say more about this later on, but in many instances, when I couldn't envision what that thing would be like, I went to this very platform, meaning YouTube, since that's where this video is going first. I went to YouTube and I watched videos. I found content. I immersed myself in the visuals of what is it actually like to be at that event? What is it like to be in that city? What is it like to be having that experience? And I would look at the visuals. I would watch people's vlogs. I would listen to people tell stories about their experience. And little by little, I was normalizing the experience that I wanted to have. And that's very important, by the way. If you visualize in a way that makes it feel out there and big and grandiose and far away and extreme, that's not going to do a whole lot for you. You want it to feel expected. You want it to feel normal. You want it to feel like the thing that's about to happen next. And I would find content that literally did give me that feeling. I had read so many Q&As. I had read so many guides. I had watched so many videos. I had heard so many people talk about it. I had seen it from so many angles. I can think of multiple things I did this with, multiple experiences I've had, where even before I got to the point where I'd had the experience, it was so normal to me that I just expected it to happen. It felt like the obvious thing about to happen next. And I had already seen and felt it in various ways in my mind's eye. So that is my tip number 4. Try focusing on experiences, not things. See if that feels like a shift for you. Tip number 5 now, halfway through the list. Tip number 5, journal through your ideal every day. I'll tell you a secret if you've made it thus far in the episode. This number 5 tip really might be my favorite one of this entire list because it is so powerful. And even in my own life, I cannot overstate how life-changing the insights were for me when I did this very thing, when I use this very exercise myself. But tip number 5, I want to invite you, journal through your ideal every day. And here's what I mean by that, and here's how I came up with this. So often when people try to think about their future, for the sake of any exercise along these lines, the questions that get asked and the prompts that we're supposed to use feel so enormous and so all-encompassing and so mentally overwhelming that our mind gets stuck. And it's almost like we don't even know where to begin. We have no access point. We have no starting point. We have no launching pad. And last year, I was teaching a workshop. This was right before I started my spiritual teaching era on this channel, by the way. Shout out. But last year I was teaching a workshop, and this question came through, even just for me personally in my preparation process. Stefan, journal through not your bucket list dream day, which was something, by the way, that I had done multiple times before. But it suddenly came through me, the idea to journal through my ideal every day. And here was the difference. Even when I had done some form of this exercise in the past, right? I was always asked about it, almost from like a Make-A-Wish, live like you were, word I don't want to say on this platform, Tim McGraw song vibe. Tim McGraw? Not Tim McGraw. Rascal Flatts? I think it's Rascal Flatts. I don't know. Let me know in the comments who that song is by. I think it's Rascal Flatts, not Tim McGraw. But the point is, whenever I had done this in the past, it was almost like I was being asked, if you only had one day left, what would you do in it? What would your bucket list day be if you could do anything? And listen, all of these things can give us valuable pieces of information. So if you feel drawn to any of the things that I'm referencing, even in passing, I would never shut that down whatsoever. But for me, the limitation in the past had been I was always asked about this in such an over-the-top bucket list, if you only had one day, what would you do with it kind of way. And I found that wasn't really giving me insights about my future, particularly because there might be things that I thought would be a cool experience to do one time, one day. There might be things that if I only had one day left, I'd want to do. But for some reason for me, that question wasn't necessarily helping me access what life did I want to build? What is my actual vision that I'm trying to create and bring to life here? What future do I want to be moving towards? And I will never forget, one day the idea comes to me, Stefan, you don't need to be journaling through your bucket list day. You need to journal through your ideal every day. And so the way that I did this exploration was, if I could choose what I got to do within the span of one day, but that one day, what I was choosing was a day, not that I was going to live once and only once, but almost the opposite. The day that I was choosing was going to be my every day. We could almost say my Groundhog Day, though I don't want it to be foreboding. But, hopefully you see what I mean here. If I was to put things on a list, and in order to go on the list, it needed to be something I wanted to do over and over again, something I would love to do, something I would be delighted to do day after day after day. What would go on that list? And I remember I journaled through this, and it was a little new, a little different, a little challenging to answer for the first time because I had never done something like this before. But I did the journaling exercise and I answered it. And then I actually did it again and again and again. I'm pretty sure I answered this 4 or 5 different times in total over the period of a few months. And when I tell you, I got so many insights, so clearly, so undeniably from doing this exercise. And so partly what I want to suggest here is the entire purpose of the kind of visualization we're talking about here is to help you identify what is the future I want to create, and then be able to connect to it, be able to keep it in your consciousness moving forward. And part of what I want to suggest is that doesn't just have to be done through the most traditional mental picture sense of visualization. But this could be an exercise that allows you to connect both to the guidance of that future, telling you what direction you should move in, and to the energy of it. So that's my tip number 5. And it is so, so, so powerful if you go do this and implement this yourself. Journal through what is my ideal every day. And perhaps that will give you a different access point and gateway to information about your future. That brings me to tip number 6 on the list. Tip number 6, which is involve other senses. Involve other senses. Now, what I find really interesting that I want to bring up with this tip in particular is, it's fascinating to me when people talk about visualization. One of the most common examples that gets used is Olympic athletes and the way that Olympic athletes see the victory long before they win the gold medal. And people will talk about how they already saw themselves winning. They already saw themselves beating the record. They already saw themselves getting that gold medal long before it actually happened. And listen, I actually think those examples and those studies are very powerful and very strong evidence that our subconscious mind does not know the difference between imagined and reality. So I love those examples. I'm very much on board. But here's what I think is important to point out. In those examples, The person didn't just use one of the five senses. When Olympic athletes are led through a process where they visualize and feel and imagine themselves winning the race, winning the gold medal, whatever the case may be, long before it happens, they're not just using sight, inner or outer. They're not just using any one of their five senses. As I understand it, they're using them all to have a very real, tangible, visceral, physical, embodied experience, feeling themselves winning that race. And I wanted to bring up this example because even this example that gets used a lot when people talk about visualization is evidence that we need to involve all of the senses, not just one, but all of the senses. And I will point out while we're here, I use this principle and this understanding a lot in my teaching, because what I know is the more your senses get engaged, the more something can make an impression on the deepest level. And particularly, the more your subconscious mind can absorb it. You know, I love a good metaphor. I love a good analogy. I feel like my average is probably, I don't even know, 7 examples, analogies, illustrations that I'll use within the context of one particular normal teaching. But I really do understand this principle. The more our senses get engaged, the more it integrates, the more it sticks with us, the more it is likely to make an impression on our subconscious in a permanent way. So tip number 6 here that I want to suggest is involve other senses. Involve all of your senses, as many senses as possible. Smell can be involved. Taste can be involved. Hearing can be involved. Seeing, the obvious one, certainly can be involved. Touch can be involved. And I think this piggybacks well off of number 4, the idea of experiences, not things. As you visualize something, as you think about your future, as you perhaps consider an experience that you want to have, something you want to end up living in, something you want to become, I invite you to ask, who will be with you? What will be around you? What will you be wearing? What will you be looking at? What will you be feeling? What will you eat or drink in the midst of that, perhaps to celebrate it? There's infinite ways you can do this. But I want to invite you, involve your senses. Involve all of your senses. I also want to point out here, music can help with this tremendously because music invokes feelings. And again, I don't want to, overstate this with the Olympic athlete example, but I think it's very much true. When Olympic athletes are being guided through those exercises, it's not just that they're seeing something like a slideshow and a mental picture. It's more than that. They're seeing themselves do something. And as they see it, they're feeling themselves do something. And as they sit with the experience of it, as they breathe into the experience of it, they're feeling things viscerally in their body, in their nervous system, in the present moment. They're feeling something about the experience. And so I love to use music in this process. And that also connects to several of my earlier tips. But music is very powerful here because music invokes feelings. And the last thing I want to say on this tip number 6 is remember that the key thing here energetically in all of this is expectation. Why? Because as you've heard me quote before, we don't automatically get from life what we want. We get what we expect. Expectation is so crucial, is so important. I will always be throwing into my teachings the power of expectation. And so I want to remind you, the key thing here energetically is expectation. And as I think about this topic, I am aware I have had expectation around things in the past, even when there were still some visual gaps in my brain yet to be filled in terms of what exactly it was going to look like. But there was something creating expectation for me. Often, there was something I was able to do that would create expectation, whether that was looking at flights or talking to people, or getting into an online community or forum of some kind to start reading up about it and asking my questions, or researching options in advance, making a list of things I wanted to try, places I wanted to go, building a playlist for something, buying outfits for something, writing down a post or a caption that I would share. The list goes on and on and on, but we're talking about things that engaged various parts of my brain, various different senses, various parts of my consciousness, and all of which built expectation. And I hope you see here, that really is the magic. That really is the key. That really is the secret sauce. Those Olympic athletes did whatever they had to do to expect the gold medal, to expect themselves to deliver a gold medal performance. And that is what makes the difference. All right, let's move forward now to tip number 7. Tip number 7 on my list, which is consider hypnosis tools to activate a different part of your mind. Tip number 7. Consider hypnosis tools to access a different part of your mind. Now, just to kind of round out the picture between all these different tips today, I mentioned earlier that typically the best kind of visualization happens in 2 different states: play and rest. It doesn't notice, by the way, happen best, at least not for me and from my experience, it doesn't tend to happen best in an intense focus state, in a working state, in a productive state. As I shared earlier, from my experience, from my understanding, the best visualization moments tend to happen in a state of play or a state of rest. I've given a lot of thoughts already that pertained to the play side of things. Getting relaxed, having fun, turning on some music, letting yourself be in motion, letting images come through naturally and organically while you're doing something you love, even with your eyes open, right? I've given a lot of thoughts that really pertain to the play side of the equation. Now I want to speak to the rest part. Again, making the point here, this is not something that you're going to be able to force by like sitting in an office, sitting at a desk, sitting at your workstation and saying, I'm not leaving here until I have correctly visualized whatever. That is not the state that's going to help you with this, right? But on the rest side of things, I do want to acknowledge and just share from my experience here that this is where I have found hypnosis tools to be very powerful. because they put you in a relaxed state. They put you in a receptive state where your conscious mind gets to rest, to take a break, to take the day off for a second, and your subconscious mind goes to work. That is, by the way, why I said here in tip number 7 that we use these tools to access a different part of your mind than what you would usually access. And what I have found is when you get that relaxed, when you move into a theta state of brain waves and you linger there in your body, in your brain, in your nervous system, what I have found is that from that state, different ideas, different images, different mental pictures and glimpses and sparks of vision can come forward from a different part of you. And I want to point this out because specific to the context of this partner's question and what they were sharing with me, I feel like perhaps in the past, they have attempted to do some sort of exercise or visualize in some way that came from a heavy place, from a cerebral place, from a healing-oriented place, looking at the past. But for me personally, what I can speak to and say is that often the visualization moments that have surprised me and been helpful, been instructive, either came from play or rest. And the ones that came from rest, I had to be very relaxed. I had to be able to answer from my subconscious mind, not just the conscious mind's default answers. And before we move on, I will just mention here, Joe Dispenza's guided meditations, particularly ones that are intended to connect you to the energy of your future. I think those can be incredibly helpful to access a different part of your brain, shift you into a different frequency, and ultimately take you to a fresh, new, different place in imagination when it comes to your future. But I wanted to point that out. I wanted to share that on tip number 7, that there is the play side of things. There is also the rest side of things. And I do find hypnosis tools helpful on the rest side of things to access a different part of you and your consciousness. All right. Tip number 8. And I am realizing in real time that it is taking me a long time, more than I expected, to go through this list. But please let me know in the comments if you're still with me. I know this is a different type of episode, but I did believe it was going to be useful for many, many people out there. So it would mean the world to me if you would let me know that you are here and if it is speaking to you. Let me know if this kind of content is helping. Tip number 8 that I want to share is notice clues over time. Tip number 8, notice clues over time. So one frustration that I feel like many, many people have when it comes to trying to visualize is that they feel like I'm supposed to be envisioning my future. And literally, in the example that this partner had shared with me that I did not read out loud the full message, they had done an exercise where the instruction was essentially all at once, let's visualize your future. And I'm just aware, I've spent 10 years running a business in personal development, 15 years as a client and a student of personal development. I've done a lot of exercises over the years, as you can imagine. And I really do think there is often this pressure to have an answer all at once, to visualize it all at once, to get the vision download all at once. And again, all I can do is share from my journey and my experience, but I want to be a voice in this episode today that advocates for noticing clues over time about your life, your desires, and your future. I really do feel very strongly that this is going to be a breakthrough insight, a life-changing aha moment for somebody today. That you don't need an answer about your purpose, your destiny, your vision all at once, but it really is okay for you to notice clues over time. I felt led to share this little example here. I have a photo folder on my phone, and it is literally called My Dream Life. And by the way, it is not called that to imply that I am not already living my dream life and in that vibration, because something I'm very, very aware of is I have already lived in many ways the fullness of the dream that Stefan in college had of what was possible for him. You may have heard Oprah say time and time again that God's dream for your life is even bigger than your own dream. And I really do believe that that is the case. I really do know that to be true. Oprah also says, by the way, the secret to her success is that she lives in God's dream for her life, and that space opens up infinite possibilities. But I mention that to say, I'm already very aware. What I thought would be a dream come true at 21 years old, I've already done. I've already lived. I've already surpassed. So I want to take a moment of gratitude. I want to take a moment to say thank you, God, that I'm already living infinitely more than what 21-year-old me could imagine. And that makes me so emotional. And thank you, God. But, you know, from the point of living one dream, living one vision, living one set of desires, new ones are always birthed. And that is how we keep growing. That is how we keep expanding. That is how we keep evolving into more and more of who we are and more of the goodness that God has in store for us. And so anyway, thank you for letting me go on that tangent. But I have a folder where I get to hold an ever-expanding vision. And the possibilities, the glimpses, the vision of my life and my future and my desires forever gets to expand and gets to evolve and gets to increase and transform and take new shape. And so anyway, long tangents here. I have this folder on my phone. And every time I see something that calls out to me in any way, I don't have to overanalyze it. I don't have to think about it extensively. I don't have to make some type of a decision right then and there. But anytime something calls out to me and a part of me says, yes, that is for you. Yes, that lights you up. Yes, there is something for you there. I can't even fully put the feeling into words. It's kind of like a little zing going off inside of me. But anytime I have that feeling and I just feel pulled towards it, I just feel drawn, I screenshot it and I add it to that folder. And you know what's wild, but maybe not surprising, is when I look back at that folder at any point in time, because it is an ever updating, ever growing, ever expanding folder. There are so many ideas and so many glimpses and so many valuable pieces of information just sitting there for me, waiting for me to use them. Valuable information that could only have happened as I noticed the clues over time. I would also say, as an example of this tip number 8, I mentioned to you earlier how I did the ideal day exercise 4 or 5 times, I believe, over the span of a couple months. Now, even the first time that I did that exercise, I want to be very clear that it was powerful. Just as I believe for each and every one of you, if you journal through that and do that exercise today, I believe you will get incredible insights. I believe it will be powerful for you even today, right? But man, when I had 4 or 5 times of doing that exercise that were pretty spaced out with some time in between them, there was infinitely more insight for me there. Because I could see what was recurring. I could see what kept popping up again and again. I could see all of these different pieces and put them all together, seeing a bigger picture than I might have been able to see just with any one individual thing. So I want to encourage you here today. The picture of your future doesn't have to come in some big, dramatic, all-at-once dream or vision or download. It can come through many different clues, many different glimpses, many different little mental notes that you make over time. So that's tip number 8. Notice clues over time. Tip number 9. We're getting close to the end here of my list. Tip number 9 is pray for vision. If you want to connect to your future and you're struggling to visualize, one huge message that I would speak and share with you today, tip number 9, pray for vision. And I want to be very clear with this tip. Vision can show up in a variety of ways. It can be pictures, but it doesn't have to be. And there's nothing inherently better about it being pictures, right? Just as I made it clear, you want to and you can use all of your senses. There's nothing inherently required about it just being one. In the same way I would suggest here, it doesn't have to come in pictures. The vision can show up in a variety of ways. But tip number 9, I want to invite you to pray for vision. And if you do, you will be given something undeniable to walk out and walk into. I want to invite you, if you're brave, to pray this prayer today. God, talk to me about my future. I'm all ears. If you're brave, I want to invite you to pray this prayer with me today. God, talk to me about my future. I'm all ears. And then I want to invite you, have a physical notebook or a digital notebook where you can record anything that you notice, anything that you hear, anything that comes through, that intuition speaks, that comes to you in a still, small voice. And I want to encourage you with this text. I read it in a recent teaching. There's a spiritual text that says, ask of our benevolent God, who gives to everyone generously and without rebuke or blame, and it will be given. Ask of our benevolent God, who gives to everyone generously and without rebuke or blame, and it will be given. And I specifically want to make the point, did you know that text is actually about asking for guidance most specifically? Now, it mirrors many, 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 many other texts about asking and receiving. And so in very good faith and in logical fashion, it can be applied to all different kinds of asking and receiving. But I think it should be noted most directly, that particular text is actually encouraging people to ask for guidance with the understanding that God gives to everyone generously. You're not going to get in trouble for asking. You're not unspiritual for asking. You're not asking for too much. You're meant to ask God, understanding that divine, infinite, loving intelligence is so benevolent, that God gives to everyone generously without rebuke or blame, knowing it will be given to you. So I want to invite you to pray. God, talk to me about my future. I'm all ears. And I will tell you, there has never been a question in your mind, in your consciousness, in your awareness that God did not have an answer for. There has never been a problem that you have faced that there was not already a solution for in the mind of God. So if you ask for vision, you're going to receive vision. And again, it may come in pictures, it may not, it may come in a different way. But you will receive vision, you will receive guidance, you will receive messages about your future. And it will give you something undeniable to walk out and to walk into. That brings me to the last tip on my list, the final point that I want to share here. Tip number 10, which really I think builds on tip number 8 about the clues quite well. And tip number 10 that I want to end with in this list is pay attention to what you pay attention to. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. What I mean by that is this. What tends to get your attention when it comes to somebody else, particularly in the online realm, when you have access to infinite possibilities? You know, I always find it fascinating when people get upset about what is on their feed. I really do. Because you are the one that built your algorithm. And yes, I know every platform has its annoying things and ads get pushed on you. And of course, I acknowledge there's things that we wish were different about any particular platform that are not under our control. But fundamentally, your algorithm is a reflection of you, is it not? Your friends and followers or for you list is a reflection of you, is it not? And it's so funny to me because sometimes there are people online who keep consuming stuff they despise, stuff they dislike, stuff they hate over and over and over again. And then they go to the comments to complain about it. And my favorite example is, it would be like if you went to a buffet knowing that you hated crab legs or were allergic to crab legs. But despite this fact, despite having this knowing, you kept getting plate after plate after plate of crab legs and ending up miserable with complaints. Please don't do that to yourself. I know I'm on another tangent here, but please don't do that to yourself. But I believe my community, and especially my group of partners, I believe that you are very intelligent and very intuitive and very self-aware. And I know that this is not a community of people getting the crab legs, even though they're allergic. I say all of this tangent to say, given that your feed, that your algorithm, that what stands out to you online is all in some way, shape, or form a reflection of you. I want to invite you to pay attention to what gets your attention, particularly online. When you have access to infinite possibilities, could it be that you're watching something or listening to something because it's connected to an experience you want to have? Could it be that you're paying attention to someone or something because you have unmet needs or unfulfilled desires there? Could it be that you keep observing in others something that you might deep down have, at the very least, a curiosity about yourself? Chances are, and this is how I felt led to say it in my response to this question today, chances are the core elements of your desired future are hiding in plain sight in your reality right now. I feel excited in this moment about putting this episode out because I don't think purpose has to be so elusive. I don't think destiny has to be so elusive. I don't think our future has to be so elusive. Chances are the core elements of your desired future are hiding in plain sight in your reality right now. So your job then becomes, how can I recognize that? How can I recognize what I want that is hiding in plain sight? How can I recognize the obvious signs and signals pointing to my future that I've been missing? How can I move that from subconscious to conscious awareness? And then, how can I close the gap of separation and connect myself to that? I'll give you a simple example here. Let's say, for example's sake, that you have never been to Europe, but after you listen to this episode, you start to know your feed contains a lot of content showing Europe. A lot of sightseeing content, a lot of day in the life maybe, lots of landmarks, lots of restaurants, lots of nightlife. I don't know what it is for you, but let's suppose you start to realize I have so much Europe on my feed. Isn't that interesting? Especially seeing as I've never been there. And so let's suppose you realize, and maybe this is an obvious example. I don't know if this is the best one to use, but let's say that you realize, you know what? I think I'm paying attention to this for a reason. I think at least some part of me wants to have at least some type of experience on that continent. And upon realizing that, your job then becomes, okay, I am moving this from subconscious to conscious awareness. I'm going to own that I'm paying attention to it for a reason. I'm going to own that there is something in me resonating with this. I'm going to own that this is for me. Now, how do I close the gap of separation and connect myself to it? And maybe this is a very obvious example, but I pray that this example will be helpful. And by the way, I'm kind of illustrating in real time a principle that I taught earlier, because as I share this example with you, we're incorporating more senses, right? So perhaps instead of just watching reels or short form video about Europe, if you were to realize this, right? perhaps you might start to research. Okay, let's say I wanted to do a 5-day trip in Europe. Let me research what would be the easiest destinations to easily see within a 5-day span of time. And you might start looking at train options that go from country to country. And you might start researching flights. And again, there's infinite examples here, but perhaps you might start researching restaurants. Perhaps you might start researching hotels. Perhaps you might start researching destinations. And now you're starting to make the connection. You're closing the gap of separation. You're connecting yourself to the thing you want. And instead of just consuming a whole bunch about Europe, do you see what I mean? Now you're starting to put yourself in the picture. You're starting to think about yourself in Europe. And you're engaging the senses and you're having fun with it. And most of all, you're building expectation. So those are the 10 tips that I wanted to share with all of you today. And I can't resist. I am going to pray for you in a moment. Even though I know this isn't a normal teaching, I must admit, I jump at the chance to pray with you and for you whenever I have it. So we are going to end this with a prayer and do that together in just a moment. Once again, I want to thank the specific partner who asked this question and inspired this episode. And to thank all of my partners worldwide for their support. We make this content available to everyone. And the only way that works is because there are partners. Not people who pay simply because they have to in order to get access, but people who choose to support just because they want to and because they see the vision, because they believe in this work. And may I just say here, I am convinced, and you cannot sway me otherwise, I am convinced the reason that such incredible, miraculous, almost unbelievable yet believable things happen for my partners is because they choose to receive in that way and on that level. They're not paying because they have to here. They're supporting because they choose to. And even the choice to do that is going above and beyond. Choosing to be generous just because, choosing to be a sower just because, and I really do believe that is responsible for why my partners see the results and the transformation that they do. So if this spoke to you today and you found it helpful, you are certainly welcome to participate with us in an energy exchange here. You can feel into what number is right for you. Nothing is too small. Nothing is too large. All of the giving options are available for you at lovegrovepartners.com. And you can participate in this moment and receive what was here for you today in an extra personal way. But let me just share a quick thought related to the topic of this video here. While people all around the world are giving at lovegrovepartners.com, you probably noticed and observed by now, when people give to support this work, we use a very specific word. We call it sowing. And we do so for a reason. We do so because we are giving with expectation. And you would never plant something without having a vision of what harvest you intended to grow. Well, the same principle applies here. And so every single time we give anywhere, any place, we are giving with expectation. And you've heard perhaps me teach this before, but this is not a community where we believe in the idea of giving or really doing anything with no expectation. I know some people teach that is actually spiritual. Some people teach that is correct. Some people teach that is the way to avoid any disappointment or pain in life. Just remove expectation. And yet, the number one spiritual invitation that you and I are divinely given on all levels is the invitation to believe. The invitation to actually expect something from the divine, to expect something good. And so hopefully you figured out by now this is not a community where we do things from the principle of no expectation, but rather powerful expectation, holy expectation, sacred expectation. And I am right there with you. I'm going to do my daily giving in just a little while today. And I am right there alongside you, always giving with expectation and being clear what seed I am putting into the ground. Every transfer of money is a transfer of energy. And so it just makes sense to be clear on what you're setting into motion. Now, by the way, you can, of course, do that with any investment that you're making. And I recommend that you do it, especially with any major investment. But, specific to giving, this practice is actually related to the overall topic today, because your seed determines your harvest, and your sowing is connected to your future. If you want a different harvest, then it only makes sense. Change your seed. If you want a different future, on every level, change what you're sowing in the now. And I wanted to share this thought again, specific to this video today, because this is quite literally one way of building more faith, more vision, more expectation around your future. I felt led to share in this very room that I am recording in. I've got something that I call my harvest basket. And it is full of intentions, prayers, declarations that I have written down on little pieces of paper over and over and over again each time that I have sowed a seed. And over time, it has gotten full to the point of overflowing. I've had to stuff them down a little bit and rearrange them and try to keep having room for even more. Literally, what I just realized in this moment, what I have had to do with my harvest basket is the literal picture of the scripture that says, "Give and it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, running over, making room for more." I am so happy. This is just hitting me in real time. I've never thought about it this way before, so you all get to hear it first and hear it live. But literally, that is what has happened with my harvest basket. I have had to shake it up and press it down to make room for more, because it is that overflowing. And so I just felt led to mention this because my harvest basket is not some, weird, wild, strange visualization exercise. It's very simple, actually. It's just one seed after another. Maybe you've heard that trending audio from years ago where Lady Gaga says, bus, club, another club, another club, another club. Well, I'm here to tell you, my harvest basket isn't anything complicated. It's just seed, seed, another seed, another seed, another seed. That is all that it is. One seed after another it has been. Writing down something I wanted to plant in my future. Not typically something that I had urgency around right now, but something I wanted to see down the line, in my life, down the road, in the days to come. And little by little, doing this as a spiritual practice has built my faith and built my expectation. And now I live in continual harvest and continual receiving. And I wanted to share that with you today. This is like a bonus tip number 11, you could call it. Because sowing with intention, sowing with the expectation of a harvest, sowing into my future has quite literally been a way that I have built the expectation of my future and made it more real, more dominant, more of a creative force in my awareness and in my consciousness. So, thank you, partners. Thank you to everybody who is giving right now at lovegrovepartners.com. And let's join together as we conclude this episode today with a prayer. If you would like, if it is safe and comfortable to do so right where you are, you can go ahead and close your eyes. And God, I just thank you for this perfect, holy instant in which all things are possible. Thank you that in you we live and move and have our being. That there is no separation, that all of God is right where we are. That we are loved, we are supported, we are held at the deepest level and at the highest level, right here, right now. God, I pray for every single person who joined me for this episode. I believe that if they are here, they are a person of faith. They are a person of the future. They are someone who desires to walk by faith and not by sight, someone who lives from vision, someone who understands that there is more for them to experience than all of their circumstances and the appearances of life may reflect right now. And God, I am praying that they would walk away from this experience with exactly what they need. I don't know every detail. I don't know every dream and desire. I don't know every situation. But God, as they enjoy this episode and as they leave this space today, I am praying and I am believing that they are walking away with exactly the message they need. God, may they put images and reminders in front of them that keep their vision top of mind. Things that would shift their subconscious in such an easy, automatic way over time. I pray that they would be able to access a frequency of play. God, as I was preparing for this teaching, I thought about all the texts, all the places and all the books where we are invited to have faith as a child. And I don't think this can be overstated. That the zone we want to be in order to be a person who believes, is not some heavy, intense, pressure-filled adult zone that might be what our ego suggests to us. But rather, in text after text, we are invited to come to the divine as a little child, to see the world through childlike eyes, childlike wonder, childlike perspective. We are invited to believe the way that a child believes. And one thing I know for sure is that the average child, especially when it comes to the things they really want, is far more driven by desire than by any fear. So God, I speak a childlike optimism, a childlike trust, a childlike faith and expectation for every single person praying with me today. And in that frequency, may we operate from a space of play where we get to relax, where we get to enjoy, where we get to receive with ease. God, for every single person praying with me now, may they receive all that they need, including the vision they need, while they are in the flow. May they be guided to all sorts of incredible experiences, breathtaking experiences over the next 6 months, God. I decree and declare they have experiences of the best kind they never would have dreamed they would have. I am praying specifically right now over everyone who does that journaling prompt, that journaling exercise today that so changed my life. God, would you use it in just as powerful of a way in their life? May they be guided to exactly what they would enjoy every day as they open up to that guidance. What I know for sure, God, is that the guidance always comes in the moment. The seed always gets planted in the now. And I feel led to pray over them. May they not feel the overwhelm of their entire future all at once, because I've been there, God. I know how it is. And sometimes we feel paralyzed in our minds, unable to move, unable to go forward, unable to think clearly. Because all the possibilities and all the unknowns and all the elements of our entire future all at once just weigh on us so heavily. But as I pray today, I am believing we don't have to operate that way, that we're not going to get stuck in that trap, in that cycle today, but that we can meet you here in the present moment, remembering that the guidance always comes in the moment. We don't need all the answers and all the details for our entire future right in this moment. But we can meet you here in this moment, and we can receive all the support, all the guidance, all the vision that is meant for us in this moment. Thank you, God, that even as we pray, our expectation is changing, that you are supernaturally transforming our expectation on all levels, helping us believe something new and expect something new. God, as I was preparing to pray today, I felt so strongly that I needed to take a moment here on this idea of expecting something new. And I feel so strongly there are people listening and praying with me now, and their mind has had an expectation. that is completely driven by the past. And so when they think about their life, when they think about their future, when they think about what to expect even in the short term, their mind keeps using the past as a reference point. And maybe they're trying to answer the past. Maybe they're trying to reassure themselves that it doesn't have to be like that anymore. Maybe they're trying to rewire that story and they keep getting stuck. But I just came today to decree and declare over them that the past is not here, and the past does not have to be their reference point and their starting point anymore. And I decree and declare in this moment, people praying with me now are moving into a brand new story where their expectation is no longer answering the past or answering the old, but from this moment forward, from this day forward, they live in a brand new story. They feel free to imagine, free to dream, free to create, with no limitation of what has come before. We just take a moment to release all that has come before this moment. It does not have to have any relevance here. Not anymore. We just release. We feel it dissolving. We feel ourselves getting a little lighter as we release in this moment all that came before. God, I specifically pray today for everyone who is joining me in this prayer of vision. God, talk to me about my future. I'm all ears. Talk to us, God, about our future. We are all ears, and I bless every single person who is bravely praying that today into all the guidance, all the answers, all the vision that I know with certainty they will receive. And I use this text, and I felt led to speak this text. Ask of our benevolent God, who gives to everyone generously and without rebuke or blame, and it will be given. May they feel that knowing on the deepest level right now. It is given. It is finished. It is done. God, may they start to pay attention in a new way, with new eyes, fresh perspective. May they notice all the clues that have been hiding in plain sight. May they recognize all that is there for them in their life. I bless every single person who has made it thus far in this episode. I bless every single person who will be using any one of these tools and tips in their own life this week. I bless every one of my partners, and I bless every single person who is giving today, participating in an energy exchange, and receiving this word. I bless them into a rapid harvest, a maximum harvest, and 100-fold return. Thank you, God, for doing what only you can do. Thank you, God, for undeniable miracles and gifts and blessings flowing into our experience. And now, God, before I wrap up this prayer, in a frequency of trust, in a frequency perhaps of stillness and relaxation, in a frequency that I pray is one of resting in the love, I just want to give every single person a moment to open up to any mental pictures, any visuals, any senses, any feelings, any experiences that would pass through their consciousness right now, even before we leave this space. I want to make it clear that there is no pressure whatsoever in this moment. There is nothing you need. There is nothing to prove. There is no pressure whatsoever in this space. No matter what, you can't mess it up. No matter how you're moving through this moment, you're doing it right and you're doing great. Please hear that right now. Please give your inner child a hug and some reassurance if they need it. But with no pressure, with no attachment, simply with an openness, an open mind, and an open heart. We take a moment right now just to open up and see. Is there anything here for me to see? Is there anything here for me to feel? Is there anything here for me to notice? Take a second and just observe, in case there is anything here in this moment for you. Specifically, I feel led to pray, to throw out the question for each one of us. God, is there anything for me to see about my life, about my future? Are there any desires that I'm supposed to notice right here, right now? Are there any dreams that I am meant to connect to, or maybe even to reconnect to right now? And let's just linger. One more moment, breathing deeply in the stillness. If there is anything that comes forward for you, feel free to make a note of it as soon as we are done praying together. If nothing specific jumped into your mind or stood out to you, please, please, please know and hear me that that is totally A-okay. I have found, as I shared with you in this teaching earlier, guidance is never something we need to force. Vision is never something we need to force. And it is all going to flow to you perfectly right on time. So there is no pressure around having to have a specific type of experience or result in this space today. Just space, just opportunity, just possibility that I wanted to create. And so, God, as we conclude, I pray a blessing, a rich blessing, a limitless blessing on every single person in this community and every single person here with me today. May they know at the deepest level of their being that you have plans to prosper them, to fill them with hope, with belief, with expectation, and plans to give them a glorious future. May they know that. May they rest in that. And may they, from this moment forward, from this day forward, be far more pulled by the future than driven by anything from behind. I speak this word for each and every person in agreement with it in the name of Jesus, who said, all things are possible for the one who believes. And you are the one, we are the ones who believe. And so it is, and so we are. Amen and amen. Well, family, if you found this helpful, I am so glad that you and I were connected in this episode today. And I want to ask right before this wraps up, would you do me a favor? Would you take a second and share this episode on your social media? It is a simple step that takes only 60 seconds or so to do, but you never know who in your world might need this episode, who this could make a world of difference for. I will say my entire intention in taking the time to record this, to answer this question so thoroughly, and to share it with the public is that it would be able to be a resource for as many people as possible. So thank you for helping me make that intention come to life. Thank you for sharing it with your people. And last but not least, this entire episode was, of course, sparked by a question from my email list and the opportunity that I gave people on my email list to ask for what they needed. Now, you might be listening thinking, I don't feel like I got that message and I don't want to miss out. If you ever do that again, I want to be able to submit something next time. If that is the case, I would love to be connected to you via email. There is a website you can go to. It should be linked in the episode description here, and it is lovegrove.club. That's Lovegrove, my last name, .club, C-L-U-B. When you go to that website, you can sign up in 15 seconds or less. It is completely free. I will send you my favorite teaching of all time right to your inbox as a gift and as a thank you for signing up right away. And then you and I will be connected. And I will get to encourage you and send powerful messages of faith right to your inbox on a regular basis. So don't miss out. Let's get connected there, lovegrove.club. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If you haven't yet, like this video and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you so much. I'll see you back here soon for another episode. But in the meantime, know that I love you, I believe in you, and the best is yet to come.